Good morning and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Rise and shine. It's a beautiful Wednesday morning here in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm Kayode Okikiolu. You know, Lagos is Nigeria's commercial capital, as we always say. I like to put that in because it's the reality, the sheer volume of economic activity that happens in Lagos is just mind-blowing. But as we've seen recent, the inflation, the rise in cost of different things, from food to transport to literally everything. And there's been this conversation about how to reduce inflation. A lot of people were looking to the MPC, that's the Monetary Policy Committee, to see if the rate will be increased, the MPR, the interest rates will be increased. Because a lot of people thought, I mean, if there's inflation, how about you make it harder for people to access loans, so it will reduce the volume of cash in circulation. But this kind of inflation we're experiencing in Nigeria is multifaceted. In fact, the CBN governor called it imported inflation. So at the National Assembly, another idea was put forward, and this one will interest you, is also directed at the CBN, actually, that we should reincorporate the use of coins. Not Bitcoin, okay? Not any of those coins, not crypto coins. I'm talking hard metal. Is it metal now? Is it nickel now? But essentially, the reintroduction of coins. And I'm sure a lot of people were wondering, what's the thinking behind that? How would coins reduce inflation? As I said earlier, the kind of inflation we're experiencing is a very tricky one. There's a forex angle of it. So it's not essentially just prices going up because they want to go up. Don't forget, there's also the food inflation, the core inflation, and all of that. So it's different things put together. But the idea behind, reintroducing coins into the system. By the way, I can't remember when last I saw, the kobo or the naira, 1 naira coin. But the idea behind it is that instead of increasing prices arbitrarily, so a product sold for 50 naira, and then of course we've seen that we've seen that it's more expensive to produce these things. So naturally, power costs, raw materials have gone up. So people will be tempted to double it when in fact it's just maybe about 20 naira increase, maybe 70 naira or 80 naira. But because you know that people hardly wait to collect their 20 naira change, I mean, you don't have it anyway, or their 5 naira change, they just increase it ×2. So the idea is increase it, reintroduce the coins rather, such that people don't increase the price of their goods ×2. They still leave that, 89.99, so you can get your coin back. I don't know what you think about this, but essentially that's one of the ideas being put forward at the National Assembly. I almost choked on that one.
When you forgive me, when you talked about coins, the first place that my mind went was, are you now going to resume spraying coins at parties?
No way. First, you shouldn't even spray the naira, but yeah.
You shouldn't spray the naira, but
coins.
All over the world, at least in advanced economies, I still see that we still, have the coins in circulation and all of that. The reasons for, the seeming fading out of coins in Nigeria's currency circulation isn't far-fetched. It is for the same inflation, reason of inflation of prices of goods, rather than, and most times people don't, those coins are not available for people to use. I'm actually on the website of the CBN now, and I see the coins that we had and then the ones that eventually evolved into it. There's 50 kobo coins, there's 1 naira coin, there is 2 naira coin, and those are the ones that are, at least latest. Of course, you still have, some of them that are. So if it's the lowest was 50 kobo, and then what happened to the 1 kobo, 5 kobo, and all those other, kobo, and then now we're talking about naira. Anyway, let's not even go there.
That's what my producer did there. It's a reminder. Good one.
Let's not even go there. But, I think the point for me, Kayode, is if we're talking about if the National Assembly is talking about this, it makes a lot of sense. But there are so many variables, just as you began by saying. What are the things that are responsible for inflation in the first place? We should be addressing, we should be talking about those things. What are the things that are making it difficult for what, okay, that's what you'll find on the website of CBN right now. What are the things that are responsible for this? Those are all of the currencies of Nigeria that you will find that we have, at least for now. And then, but you now find out that, you know, some of them, even the 5 naira note, is it 5 naira note, it's not as prominent. You don't even. I mean, forgive me. It's not even as prominent as it
How about we make 20 naira coins? 50 naira coins.
Are you sure we don't have them
from
already?
100 naira.
Are you sure we don't have them already?
No, I mean, we have notes for 5, 20, 50, but in order to get people to spend, because you can actually buy things for 1 naira, 2 naira. So if you want to make the coins actually useful, then how about you increase it to a particular amount that people actually spend, which is 20 naira, 10 naira, 50
There are many
naira.
ways to look at that thing, Kawade. Do you know how much it costs us to make the paper notes? Now, how much is it going to cost us to make the coins? That's another conversation altogether. How much does it cost us to make a 1 naira coin?
Which backs my argument up. Okay. So if it costs a lot, how about you just, you know, make higher denominations of coins anyway, instead of using, I don't know, 5 naira to produce 1 naira coin. I don't know how much it costs, I'm just saying. So produce the higher ones. I don't know if that makes sense. I think the women will be very interested in this particular conversation.
Like they're the ones who go to the markets more.
Have you that men also go to the market?
But how will we store the coins in the purse? You know, we have wallets for notes. What's going to
just have a coin bag?
Mark, what do you think?
Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. Interesting conversation on reintroduction of coins. I think what needs to be said about that has been said. If we're able to find why the coins disappeared and why it would seem that our you know, base notes are beginning to disappear as well, the solutions will not be far-fetched. As Kayode did say, you know, many instances you have to round off to the closest you know, denomination. That's one of the reasons why we rarely see. I think a few stores, a few mega stores try to use the coins. Is a psychological thing, you know, where they tell you this costs 299.99 naira or 299 naira. Let's even leave it at that. 1 naira less than 300 naira. And your mind is actually reading, it's just about 200 naira, so you pay, you don't think it's expensive. So the stores have been able to deploy that. But when push comes to shove and then you say, okay, I'm at the checkout point, where is my change? Then you now begin, then reality hits you. Then you find out that you have to round off to the closest sensible figure that you can find. Will the reintroduction of coins really solve that? I don't really think so. First, I think we have a tip culture in Nigeria. We're not the only country to have that. In the United States, it is commonplace. I think even for those who have gone on the IVLP program, they talk about how when they're given an allowance, they're given an allowance for tips as well. So you're not expected, when you have been served or you receive any service, in some instances, it is expected that you give a tip. And oftentimes, people just, you know, find the most sensible change. So let's ask ourselves, in Nigeria, we already have some people think it's a corruption culture that has flown into a tip culture, the tip culture into the corruption culture. I don't know. But think about it. For every guy who greets you, good morning, sir. Oga, welcome, sir. Oga, you know, helping you park your car. You know, or wherever it is that you give a tip, just, you know, trying to, what is the denomination that you normally give out these days? It's almost insulting to be giving someone a 200 naira tip. Oftentimes, sometimes if you feel generous, you might want to do a 500 to 1,000 naira tip. That's almost becoming standard. But it would seem that 500 naira is the general base mark. Someone was talking about instances of when you go to visit Christmas, special holidays, and you go to visit family who have children. What is the baseline money that, you know, will excite children these days? What is the currency you think that they can buy their favorite biscuit in, for instance? Well, no, not the currency. What is the denomination you think will, I think that might help to explain just how bad our inflationary pressures have gotten. And maybe that might help, let us think more about if we were to reintroduce coins, what value would actually make a lot of sense. Because I don't think that this is a matter of coins. We still have 5 naira, and we have 10 naira, and we have 20 naira, we have 50 naira, 100 naira, as a matter of fact. How many of us have those currencies in our wallets as we speak? I tend to keep those kinds of change sometimes. I gather them enough to be able to buy something else at some point and just, surprise whoever it is at a checkout point. But oftentimes, we don't really make much of those kinds of monies anymore. And I think that speaks to a larger and deeper problem, that our naira is not retaining its value. Will the reintroduction of coins solve that? I don't think so. I think that we will just waste plenty of money on monies that we will not value. And I don't think that will be worth spending our monies on. Gentlemen.
I just remember back in time, you forgive me, the currency in Nigeria's currency is naira and kobo. And guess what? We've been talking about the naira. What is the kobo? I still remember the 1 kobo coin that had a hole inside it.
Kobo is on paper. When you're doing your account balancing, you see kobo, but not in real life. And if there's anything I've learned, that it's good to work with Maokwe. So at least, I mean, Maokwe's tipping is premium. It's executive tipping.
Well, I guess we'll have to keep that on for our next trip to her in Abuja. All right, let's switch to the papers. I don't even know how much it costs to buy paper today, but before you go, let's give you some heads up. Well, I can tell you that the prices of each newspaper is on the paper. Joseph, to be clear. Look at the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning. APC throws screening open to all chairmanship aspirants. And that's the lead of the paper. Politics is definitely in the air. Fears exclusion could lead to litigations. Yari warns President Buhari against imposition. Party to rake in 1 billion naira from sale of forms. It's chairmanship of the party, right?
Wow.
Anyway, the story is on the front page, continues on the inside pages, page 2 to be precise. Right under the nameplate and above the major story, 418 million Africans in need as World Marks Water Day. We talked about this yesterday. You gave some figures, but here you have this one on the front page. Stories on page 4. 418 million Africans in need as World Marks Water Day. And this is one of the issues the Sustainable Development Goals is supposed to achieve.
And I hope people, or people in charge of these things, understand the reality on ground. I mean, imagine opening your tap and nothing comes out at a time you actually need water. For whatever reason, for different reasons, for cooking, for sanitary reasons and all of that. Imagine having to open your tap or whatever source and there's no water. Not for a day, not for 2 days, but consistently. I think if we put ourselves in the positions of those people that lack, potable water or access to water, then I think we can be more human, because I don't think there's any reason. If there's anything Africa is blessed with, is, I mean, the aquifers in Africa, the underground water is vast. We have one of the hugest, if I could use that word, deposits of water in the world. So I don't know why we have to go through this.
Unfortunately, we do. The story is on page 4 of the paper. Under the picture you see on the front page, get power before sharing it. Tambuwal tells PDP. Story is on page 2. Well, sounds like get food before you share to people.
You can easily misunderstand that as electricity.
coming from a politician and a political party.
It's pre-election year. You would hear anything these days.
That's the Guardian newspaper today.
Sport for choice, this one. But let me stick to the Nigerian Tribune. This is what you have. Southern delegates set to stop Adamu. Well, it's on APC convention as well. As Southwest governors tighten news around Buhari's candidates. Intense battle for youth leader as northern supporters of Israel Dada flex muscles. So, I mean, well, it's good to see the youths are showing up in this one. It's a page 5 read of the Nigerian Tribune. But there'll still be a lot of debate around the cost of governance, as it were. In this case, party governance, cost of forms. I mean, imagine how much it will cost now for the presidential and all of the tickets in the coming days. I think it's a conversation we need to have. Let's have a consensus of sorts, especially in the context we're in, Nigeria, that is. Well, under the big picture, which shows the president unveiling the plaque of Dangote fertilizer plant yesterday, it was a big day, really, in Lagos, for Nigeria, for Africa. But under that big picture, there's a description. Nigeria's dependence on imported product to end soon. Buhari. Directs speedy completion of Lekki Deep Seaport and railway link to harbour. Inaugurates Lagos Airport Terminal building. It's on page 6. So this is coming at a time when, you know, we have to depend on imported wheat, and, you know, with the whole challenge in Russia, Ukraine. So you wonder, because when you hear this, what comes to mind is that product that affects you the most. So is it petrol? Is it wheat? Is it raw materials and all of that? So I hope all of this is captured in that particular one. But page 6 has more details for you.
I can only hope that we take the advantage that this crisis, you know, is given to us. You remember that story that multilateral organizations like the AFDB are putting in something in the region of $1 billion to try to bridge that wheat gap in Africa in the light of what's happening in Ukraine now.
Yeah, I mean, it's about time, right? That was like yesterday. A couple of other stories, as you can see, it's a packed front page. But let me just tell you this one. NYC reviews MOU with INEC on core members' safety. You know, we're building up to election period, and you understand why this is important. There's sports on the back page, I should say. Of course, we're counting down to the World Cup playoffs. Osimhen, Dennis, 19 others in camp. So we're gonna, as they say, slug it out with Ghana in 2 days' time, and I expect that my boys, my Eagles, are on top of this. That's Nigerian Tribune. Mark.
Well, let's take a look at what the Vanguard has for you. No pact to cede presidency to Southwest. APC bigwigs insist. Stakeholders fault zoning formula, 2 days to convention. Party rakes in over 700 million naira from nomination forms. Did they open their books, or this is a calculation based on the number of people they've seen take a form? You might want to flip to page 5 to see how they came by that figure. Party rakes in over 700 million naira from nomination forms. Opposition mounts against Omishore in Southwest. Bauchi stakeholders kick. Don't hand over party to strangers. That's from Mustafa. Yaya Bello's camp upbeat. Fresh hurdles for Abdullahi Adamu as defunct legacy parties kick. So you find all of the details on page 5 of the paper. That picture there was 1,000 words. What happened in Lagos yesterday? Yes, Kaide is always making a meal out of the fact that Lagos is commercial capital, as if anybody was, you know, in competition with it over this commercial capital business. But hey, the president was in Lagos yesterday to commission a refinery and a new wing of the Murtala Mohammed Airport. And they have the story on page 19. Buhari impressed with Dangote's $2.5 billion fertilizer plant. That is on the front page as well. We don't want stories, but power. Reps tell minister. And this one, can I just say, please tell them. We don't want stories, but power. That's what the House of Reps is telling the Minister of Power. And sack 20 Cross River lawmakers. Police mount heavy security at Assembly Complex. This story is also there. 40% Nigerians below poverty line. That's according to the World Bank. And what will you make of this story? Anambra's finances. I inherited 100 billion naira debt. That's from Soludo. Some people were talking about how it will seem, or what was that story meant to achieve. You might want to flip to page 11 if it's just journalists who are bringing out that, or whether or not the debt was used for anything tangible, something that's supposed to bring further development to the state. If you look on the back page, they're keeping you updated. Ghana versus Nigeria, goalkeeper blow for Nigeria as COVID-19 rules Okoye out of Ghana clash. World Cup is Nigeria's birthright. That's according to Ikana. And you also see this blow as well. Okagbari accepts 10-year ban. That's where we leave it for Vanguard Sports. And
take a look. Yeah, take a look at the Nigerian News Direct this morning. Buhari vows to improve security. Power commends Dangote on $2.5 billion fertilizer plant. Find that story on page 2. Says nation set to witness agri boom. That story right under the that picture right under the story tells the rest of it. And a number of other stories you'll find on the front page of the paper this morning. Aviation, Buhari inaugurates new international terminal at Lagos Airport 43 years after establishment. Several other stories catch your fancy. Okay, security. Nigerian army is striving to meet security expectations. Underline the word striving in your mind. That's the Nigerian News Direct today.
I'm going to turn to leadership now, and the headline actually is quite interesting, and I like the way it's couched. Amid zoning debate and PDP, Atiku beats PMV's record attempt at presidency, makes 6th declaration. So apparently leadership is keeping count, and there's a host of riders on that one. But take a look at this one on the energy crisis. Presidency hits back at PDP, alleges plot to destabilize Nigeria. So, you know how these things go, but don't let's forget the focus here is what we have on ground, the energy crisis, and of course the security situation, big ones, as well as other stories which we may have talked about right there on the front page of leadership.
Well, they also have Daily Trust for you, and they also focus heavily on politics. Ahead of APC convention, governors, others plot against Buhari's anointed candidates. Looks like the president hasn't kept his candidates close enough to his chest. Well, initially he said 2023 is none of his business, and much later he said, you know, if I have candidates, I'm not going to talk about them because I don't want anyone to torpedo their ambition. But looks like there is wind of the president's candidates. Governors, others plot against Buhari's anointed candidates. That's the lead story on the front page of Daily Trust. Chieftains oppose takeover by CPC men. President, governors in crucial meeting today. Southwest, Northwest Borno leaders reject nominees. That's on the front page. Dangote's fertilizer will boost Nigeria's food sufficiency. FX earnings, that's from Buhari. Direct speedy concession of newly commissioned Lagos Airport Terminal, others. And just beneath the nameplate for Daily Trust, you see this. Elections, core members, other ad hoc staff get insurance cover. Yeah, that story made the rounds yesterday that the NYSC and Nigeria and INEC have reviewed their MOU. So you might want to read details on page 38. And 2023, Southwest PDP leaders insist on Southern presidency. That's also on the front page as well. Let's leave it there for Daily Trust newspapers.
Daily Times has this one, still on the visit of Mr. President to Lagos. Buhari inaugurates Dangote's 3 million metric tons fertilizer plant. Says Nigeria's dependence on imported products to end soon. Do these products include cars? Well, the details you'll find on the front page continues on the inside pages. And of course, that picture tells the story. Above the nameplate, Soludo gives insight into Anambra's finances, says state's economy not robust. That's the Daily Times newspaper this morning, and that concludes our look at the papers. Today, we're back after now. We'll take on the issues making the rounds. Stay with us.
The federal government has not shown any serious commitment to the development of the public universities and honoring of agreements with university-based unions. SSANU is losing patience with the federal government as a result of her insensitive posture with respect to the welfare and well-being of SSANU members and the university system. SSANU has employed all known peaceful means and tactics aimed at making the federal government to honor and implement the various agreements and memorandum of understanding reached with the unions to avert the looming danger, but all to no avail. Therefore, the union is left with no other option than to totally, completely, comprehensively, and indefinitely shut down the universities.
While activities in Nigerian universities are threatening to come to a grinding halt as a result of this new threat, this new impending strike threat being given by SSANU and NASU. Just in case you're wondering what those abbreviations stand for, Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities, SSANU, and Non-Academic Staff Union of Allied and Educational Institutions is NASU. Well, this is happening as ASU is still on its extended 2-month warning strike, giving the federal government more time to meet the obligations which it's promised it in its 2019 agreement. What exactly is the bone of contention here, and what will be the way forward, given that by March 27, that's the date they've given, if nothing happens for these unions, they have threatened to down tools indefinitely? Well, we have with us here this morning Comrade Mohammed Ibrahim, who is the National President, Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities. You're welcome to Sunrise Elite this morning. Thanks for having me, Malfi. Let me clarify that first. You're threatening to go down tools indefinitely if nothing happens by March the 27th. Is that correct?
We are threatening to down tools for a warning strike of 2 weeks in the first instance.
Okay.
If by midnight of 27th, which is a Sunday, nothing is done towards what we have agreed with government.
So you're not on strike now as we speak?
No, we are not.
Some people will say, why should we be worried about that? After all, the primary people in charge of teaching have been on strike. So it's not like as if you're able to teach the students in place of them. Why should Nigerians be worried about this particular threat?
Well, you know, the university is a system.
True.
And it operates with 4 university-based unions. Ours is the non-teaching arm. And as you may be aware, we occupy a very strategic position in the system running the university. We are the administrators. We are populated by professionals who run the system: engineers, medical doctors, nurses, you know, the security arm of the university, the accountants paying salaries, the ICT experts who deploy, you know, and allow the system to run, even the teaching system. So Nigerians should be worried because without these 2 very important unions, the university cannot run at all.
Well, what exactly is the basis of the strike? I mean, what exactly is the basis of the threat this time around?
Well, Maupe is a very long story, but I will try to summarize it. This is all a product of failure of or non-performance or keeping to promises by the federal government of Nigeria. In 2009, the federal government of Nigeria signed an agreement with the 4 university-based unions, SSANU, NASU inclusive, a copy of which I have here with me. And in these agreements, there were things that were reached at, we agreed with government: payment of certain allowances, improvement in conditions of service to our members, and the like. And the agreement also has in it renegotiation after every 3 years. Now, 12 years down the line, less than 40% of this agreement has seen the light of the day. And within the period under review, a lot of issues were discussed at different fora with government officials. And to fast forward to October 2020, we had a 2 weeks warning strike, and government invited us. That was after the deployment of the IPPIS payment solution, taking over the payment of salaries of members of the university, community. Now, we realized that our members were suffering untold hardship in getting their salaries paid, not only as at when due, but even having it fractured and dismembered, because registrars, bursars, administrators ended up collecting salaries of drivers, cleaners being paid salaries of vice chancellors, and so on and so forth. So the whole system was modeled up. And some people stayed 2, 3, 4 months, up to 6 months without salaries. And the issues, became unabating.
Is that as a result of the introduction of this new payment system?
The IPPIS, exactly. And also to give a background, when government tried to introduce the IPPIS system, the 4 university-based unions initially rejected. But after discussions with government, and they made us to understand that the IPPIS solution was to curb corruption and ensure efficiency in the system. And because we're administrators, we felt that we should buy into this project. And even after highlighting to government the peculiarities of the universities, because the university system runs differently from the way the public service and the civil service, runs. Therefore, we thought that we could have a gentleman agreement, and having seen that they demonstrated that they were going to take care of those such peculiarities, but only to be disappointed, just 1 or 2 months later. Now, we decided to make our complaints through the, due process, writing to government, intimating them of these hiccups. And we had a meeting with them. A committee was set up, inclusive of people from the IPPIS office, the National Salaries and Wages Commission, the office of the head of civil service of the Federation, the office of the Accountant General, and the unions. But as I'm talking to you, less than 20% of such problems have been solved. Still, our members are still having these issues of non-payment of certain allowances, which they are entitled to. Outside that, also had the issues of the non-payment of the minimum wage arrears. When government, enacted the law of the new minimum wage in 2019, the university sector, or the general education sector, made up of the colleges of education, polytechnics, and the universities, were not paid or enrolled immediately into the minimum wage, new minimum wage. And it took about 9 or 10 months before the new minimum wage was effected. And up toward till today, the arrears of such 10 months have not been paid. And we have met with government severally. Committees were formed. We have discussed with them. Statistics were given. Collation was made from the polytechnics, from the universities, and the colleges of education. As I'm talking to you, that minimum wage arrears has not been paid after several promises. Now, outside that, we also complain about our members who work in the state universities. It has become a new normal. Some state governors now coming up, establishing universities left, right, and center in order to, maybe appease the people from their villages. You see a state having 3 or 4 state universities, which is totally unnecessary, because even the ones that are existent are not even catered for. Now, our members in such state universities will have 6 months up to 1 year. For example, in Edo State, Ambrose Ali University, our members have been there for close to 1 year. They have not been paid salaries.
1 year?
Yes. And these people have parents. They have families. They cater for the families.
Is there a reason for that?
They tell you that government doesn't give them money. And that that education is a social service. Tuition is not paid. So we have such issues with the proprietors of state universities. Outside that also, we have complaints about usurpation of duties of the non-teaching staff by the academic staff.
Okay,
yes.
that's a complex one.
Yes, we realize that our jobs are being poached in the guise of what is called committee system. For example, you have a works department in every university. It's a directorate with a director and with retinue of staff. But you realize that some friends of the vice chancellors are appointed to run water distribution, diesel distribution, taking charge of generators. The jobs of the director of works is completely taken. I give you an example of one funny situation in Nnamdi Azikiwe University, where you have a professor appointed to take charge of university transport system, leaving his primary assignment to be pursuing drivers at the park when you have other things to do. Issues about issuing permits to students to get hostel accommodation, getting mattresses, and then...
I thought that was under the Dean of Student Affairs.
That is under the Deanery of the Students' Affairs. But you also have Director of Students' Affairs in some universities. You have deputy registrars in charge of such duties. But all these things are gradually being taken over. Because what is academic about water distribution in a campus? When you have somebody who has read, engineering, and you have somebody who is appointed as head of water section in the works department, being paid salary to do that job, but not allowed to do.
So the issues are a plethora. But
yes.
If you ask me, and in terms of priority and the most important, some people will talk about the salaries, the fact that people have not been, they're not being paid their just and fair wages as a result of the new IPIS system that has been deployed. And also the question of arrears of minimum wage that have not been paid across many universities. I mean, you talk about a 10-month arrears. But a lot of the other issues, some people will say that, you know, the federal government might not be able to intervene because it would seem that SSANU, in this case, is an umbrella body for all the universities, whether they be state government owned or be they federal government owned.
Yeah.
But we know that the employers are different, and it's going to be very difficult for the federal government to be able to force, for instance, the state governments to buy into or to solve the problems at the same pace that they are going to be solving their own problems as well, if you get what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
For instance, we know that IPEACE is something that has been deployed by the federal government. The state universities might not have that problem.
Yeah.
So how do you intend to unpack this problem in such a way that it makes for easy negotiation and resolution by the parties involved?
Well, from what I have listed to you, there are problems that involve the federal universities and those of the state universities. But generally, the universities are established through a license they get from NUC. So therefore, the operations of universities should be uniform. What is obtained in the federal university should be what is in the state universities. So if, for example, issues about allowances that are paid to staff in the federal universities, they also should pay the same in the state universities. That is the normal. The vice chancellors, the registrars, bursars, and all members of staff in the state universities get the same salary and allowances from those, the same with those in the federal universities. That is how it operates.
The NUC does not have that as part of its regulation, does it? Does it stipulate that salaries and wages and allowances must be uniform in both federal and state universities?
Every advert that you see for employment in federal and state universities is customized to read that salaries or appointments are made as contained in the, the university laws. Universities have laws.
Indeed.
Yes.
Are their laws uniform?
Well, they may not be totally uniform, but there are about 80% of the laws pertaining the operations of universities are same.
So I understand, for instance, I mean, we also face this problem when it comes to the healthcare system. The healthcare system is on the concurrently, so state governments own their own hospitals, as federal government also owns its own hospitals. We know for a fact that many people prefer to work at the federal-owned institutions because they say that the wages there are better. That's what we have heard. Now, in the state-owned institutions, they might have the same structure, they might have the same organizational structure as well. When I mean structure, I meant in terms of buildings and what have you. The state government structure might even be grander. And the organizational structure might also be the same thing. But we know that the wages, some states are doing pretty okay, but we know that the wages are oftentimes never uniform. As long as they're meeting the minimum wage, can anybody say that they're going to force an employer to pay the same thing that the federal government pays?
These are statutory payments. When you engage someone to do his service or give you a service, you must have agreed on the terms and conditions. Every member of staff is employed through a letter, and your letter reads that this is what you will be paid at the end of the month.
Indeed.
The statutory payments, such as salaries, and then allowances that you earn for services that are done specially. Those are things that are uniform in both federal and state universities. So if you appoint a registrar today in federal university, you pay him the same salary that you pay a registrar who you will appoint in the state university. If you appoint a principal assistant registrar in a state university, he earns the same salary, or he should earn the same salary because it is, we have what is called Contis Consolidated Salary Scale, Contis 2. And then with regards to the non-teaching staff, then CONWAS for the teaching staff. So it's something that is uniform. You do not say because education is on the concurrent list and therefore states can enact laws as it affects them. The university, you get your license from federal government, and you must have met all the statutory requirements of being licensed to operate. And that is what we are saying. Those state governors who now have made it like a competition to establish more universities when the existing ones are not funded properly should be called to order. And we also, in our meeting with government, drew the attention of NUC as the regulatory body. But we know their handicap because they cannot stop the establishment of universities. That was what we were meant to understand.
Why can't they stop it?
Because their law does not give them that power. So if the 774 local governments want to establish universities and they have made the minimum requirement of having the landmass, certain equipment and so on, they can be given the license. NUC cannot stop them. That is what the law stands for now. But we have said that there is need to review these laws, and we are lobbying members of the National Assembly to put their stamp their feet on the ground to ensure that universities are only established when they can be catered for. There is no need having so many universities, and the thing is becoming even ugly because you realize federal government even establishing 2 or more universities in a state, when the one university is not even fully catered. I give you an example of Jigawa State. There's a federal university in Dutse, and then only recently another federal university is established within the same Jigawa State. And then already there is an existing state university, and that they have not even completely, admitted the number of students required even in one university. So if you are talking about lack of funds to take charge and pay for, the welfare of staff, why are you creating and multiplying the problems?
Big question. Let's take this conversation to my colleagues in Lagos. I believe they have more questions for you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mark. Just a couple of clarifications to begin with, Mr. Ibrahim. You've talked about government responding. To be clear, what ministry, department, or agency of government are you talking about when you say you need feedback from government?
Well, because we are a labor union, all our cries naturally goes to the Ministry of Labor. Even the letter that we write government, for example, I give you a typical example. Because of the problems we have had and experienced under IPs, we have now prepared a new solution that will take care and pay our staff with its the university and its peculiarities. We call it the U3PS, which we intend to present to government if given date, because it's ready for presentation. This is a solution that we have written the Minister of Labor to intimate government that we are ready to help government by providing an enhanced technology solution.
Okay, well, Mr. Ibrahim,
pay salaries and allowances of universities of staff, staff without problems.
That's noted, but you are a labor union, but you are not employed as a labor union. You work with a university system supervised by the Ministry of Education. Does that in any way absolve the Ministry of Education from any responsibility in all these? Any conversations whatsoever with the Ministry of Education?
Now, when we write the Ministry of Labor as the conciliation ministry, what the Labor Ministry does is to invite our employers, that's the Federal Ministry of Education and the NUC, and then all other stakeholders. We have been meeting with these people. The issue is that all the meetings have not resulted into anything positive. And that is why we are complaining, and that is why we are feeling that things are not done rightly, and there is need for us to raise our voices.
But there was a meeting called by the Ministry of Education, I believe, recently, talking about some review of all of these, some part of these arrangements, these agreements that you're talking about. Wasn't SSANU also invited to that conciliatory meeting?
Yes, that you are talking about the federal government renegotiation team that was recently reconstituted. Yes, even yesterday we had our first meeting with them.
Any progress on that? Shouldn't that be something that will say, okay, some conversations have started. SSANU shouldn't be talking about going on strike again. Work has begun.
The warning strike we have earmarked to go, if nothing is done by 27th, is not only about renegotiation. We just mentioned about the issue of non-payment of our minimum wage arrears and the allowances that were promised to us in October 2020, the sum of 30 billion naira, which less than 8 billion naira was released so far. So it's not only about renegotiation, and this renegotiation only kick-started yesterday, and even the first negotiation document that we had in 2009, 12 years down the ladder, less than 40% has been implemented.
You know, a lot of people might not know this, but apparently, aside ASU, which is in its 6th week of strike now, and we're still going to, what, about a month and a half to go, the NAAT is also on strike. That's the National Association of Academic Technologists. And now we're 4 days away from a possible SSANU-NASU strike. So essentially crippling everything university education related. And that's mind-boggling. But we're focusing on trying to resolve this, hopefully. And I'll take the example of the university in Ekwoma, which you mentioned, Ambrose Ali, regarding the payment for, I think, about a year. And I saw the letter you put out there to the Ministry of Labor, the Federal Ministry of Labor. And I just want to lean on the question Mark raised earlier, just to get clarity. Did you copy state governments in that letter? Because it's not just the federal government that needs to do something here. We also have the state government. So did you copy the state's Ministry of maybe Education, Labor as well, such that we can tackle those issues, you know, particularly?
Yeah, at the meeting we had in February 2021, a committee was set up in the office of the Minister of Labor to take care of issues surrounding state universities, with the NUC being mandated to ensure that proprietors of state universities are also brought to, you know, to the table. And at the level of the unions, we have written the Governors Forum, because the governors are the visitors to all the state universities, to intimate them. And all our communications, naturally, are copied to the Minister of Education, to the Permanent Secretary, to National Universities Commission, the Salaries and Wages Commission, where it pertains, you know, payment of salaries and so on. So none of the stakeholders is left out of this cycle.
But is the JAC still the lead negotiating body, even when it comes to states, or you'd allow the unions in those universities to handle the negotiation? How is that going to work?
Once agreements are reached at the federal level, what we do is we have branches in all the state universities. And what we do is that we write vice chancellors, who are the chief executives of such universities, and that these issues are tabled before the councils of such universities.
Are the negotiations at the state level happening at the federal level? The negotiations for the state universities, are they happening at the federal level?
We don't have a different level of negotiation for state and federal universities, because the university is universal by standards, and that in Nigeria is a national university commission that regulates the activities of all Nigerian universities. So whatever that is agreed at the level of the federal government, it only follows that proprietors of state universities also key in, because we operate the same system and we have the same set of laws governing the affairs of such universities.
Okay, so give us an insight, if you can, comrade. So you had an MOU signed 2020, an MOA signed in 2021. What were the details, especially timelines, that you agreed on with government? Because you're accusing government of insincerity. So what were the timelines given, saying, okay, in 3 months, we're going to sort this? And how have those timelines perhaps been reneged upon? So tell us about the timelines given there.
Well, that is very interesting. The October 2020 meeting that we had a 6 weeks timeline. And if you count from October 2020 to date, you know that is way beyond even issues of weeks. Now, it runs into beyond months and is over a year. Then the reviewed MOA we had in February 2021 had a 2 weeks timeline. And today we are in March 2022. Out of the 7 items listed, which I can quickly just tell you, inconsistencies in the payment system by IPPIS, non-payment of allowances, renegotiation with federal government, update on constitution of visitation panels, and then usurpation of duties of non-teaching staff by teaching staff, and then non-payment of retirement benefits. Out of these, only 2 have been attempted at. That is the issue of the reconstitution of the renegotiation team and the re-engagement with the unions, which we just did yesterday from February. Then the visitation panels that were constituted by government, and the exercise has taken place, but we are still yet to see the white paper. And without the white paper, it's just an exercise in futility, because we will not be able to know who erred and who is punished and who should be reprimanded.
Right. Well, Comrade Ibrahim, just before I toss this back to Mark, where I mentioned that ASU is on strike. I talked about NAT, and now SSANU and NASU gearing up for another strike. All of this happening at a time when, I mean, education is very important to any nation, more so now. We're just recovering from COVID-19, and if there's anything you need to work in a nation, especially if we're looking to the future, it's the education sector. Should we just close our universities across board if it looks like we're not paying enough attention to it? Because if ASU is on strike, NAT is on strike, nothing is literally happening. I imagine you're not even doing anything right now, now that you're still working. So should that be the conversation? Maybe we should close these universities and focus on, what is it, the private universities, at least something that works for our children. What are your thoughts on this?
It's quite an unfortunate situation for every parent and Nigerians generally to begin to think about the situation or the plight of the university education in Nigeria. When you talk about closing down universities, that is something that is unimaginable. But anybody that will think towards that will naturally feel frustrated, or is saying it out of frustration, and I can understand. However, government is the one that established such universities. And you know that in Nigeria, it is just a case of misplacement of priorities. It is not that government cannot run this system effectively, but if the right things are done, it is just like the question of this fuel scarcity. You cannot explain what is happening. 2 months almost down the line, we have been promised every day that queues will go off, petrol will be made available, diesel is not accessible. So many things are happening at the same time. Naturally, what is happening in this country is that there is need to reprioritize, the way we operate as a government. Education, healthcare system, these are things that you do not toil with. If you have established universities, you must be able to fund them. If you have employed staff, you should be able to pay them. If you are expecting that, people are complaining about half-baked graduates. Why won't you have half-baked graduates when you have not catered for the welfare and the well-being of those that mold the character and award these degrees to students? You expect teachers to go to class and teach, administrators to go and attend to these students, without being paid salaries? It cannot work. So government should, as a matter of urgency, reprioritize its needs and ensure that education is given its desired position, its strategic position. That is the only way that will solve this problem. And I'm happy with the current conversation or the latest conversation about people thinking about stopping public officers, public office holders from allowing their children to go to private universities or even going abroad to study. If you want to remain, from the councillor to the president, if you must contest election, then there should be a proviso that your children must attend public schools and your family and yourself must go to public health facility. This is the only solution to this problem as I see it now.
that conversation might be happening, but it's been kicked out of the National Assembly. The bill is not, it didn't scale, I think. It didn't get up to public hearing. So it put paid to that conversation becoming law, at least in this particular lifespan
Nigerians can rise up to the occasion. Look at what is happening with the women.
That is exactly, that is not to rule it out completely. But I want to ask you, ASU currently is pushing that UTAS be considered the new payment system for universities. Would you be supporting ASU in that drive, since you're also discontent with IPIS as a payment system for universities?
We don't know anything about UTAS as far as SSANU and NASU is concerned, because we have not been consulted. And because of the problem that we have encountered with IPIS, we have also developed our own payment solution, which I now said the U3PS, University Peculiar Payroll and Payment System, which we have written government that we are ready to. You should also understand that payments, anything about payments in the universities is handled by our members.
Indeed.
We work in the bursary, and the ICT staff are also our members. So who is to develop a better and friendly and effective payment solution outside membership of SSANU and NASU? So if we were consulted by ASU, probably would have also given them our own suggestions. But because we don't know what they are doing, we have also developed our own, and we are presenting it to government anytime soon.
Okay, we'll see how the conversations eventually proceed, but we have to thank you for coming on the program this morning. Just to quickly add that we got in touch with the Ministry of Labour to see how they're responding to this strike threat, and they get back to us. We're hoping that perhaps they will be able to say what they're doing behind the scenes to try and ensure that SSANU and NASU do not go on strike. But we have been speaking with the national president of SSANU, who is Comrade Mohammed Ibrahim, as National President, Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities. We sincerely hope that you will get word out, and perhaps there'll be attention given to your complaints before the 27th of March. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Elite this morning.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a break at this point. We'll be back shortly to discuss other matters still on the economy. Please stay with us. Well, we're talking about agriculture right now. There's been wide conversation on food sufficiency. Nigeria spent a humongous amount of money importing food, even though sometimes the president says he's yet to be convinced, because ordinary people eat local food. So he wonders how come we're spending so much money importing food. But the CBN has been talking about how Nigeria needs to be food sufficient, and part of what the president went to do in Lagos yesterday, commissioning a fertilizer plant, also was along that direction, because part of what we also import are the inputs into agriculture, and they're hoping that to help reduce how much money, or if not totally eradicate that, and also ensure that we earn forex from food imports. We have with us a number of guests this morning to help shed light in terms of how to go about becoming food sufficient, considering what is currently going on between between Russia and Ukraine, and how a number of our food imports, staples as a matter of fact, are currently being threatened. Russia, as we know, is world #1 in the export of wheat, and Nigeria, imports a lot of wheat for its bread, and in some instances, we also import corn. The price of corn has been shooting through the roof because we do not have enough here, and we have to import to make up, and that has had also quite a number of shocks on our poultry sector, with eggs getting almost out of the reach of the common man. Well, there'll be answers to all of that today. We have with us this morning Dr. Onalo Akpa, who is the Director General Poultry Association of Nigeria. Doctor, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning. Good morning.
Thank you.
We also have with us Dr. Shuaibu Adamu, who is an agronomist, a crop specialist, and head of agriculture, Abuja Municipal Area Council. Dr. Adamu, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you, and good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Professor Ken Ife is also with us. He's a development economist joining us via Zoom. Prof, it's good to see you. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for having me, and good morning, Nigerians.
Good morning.
Morning.
Well, let me start with you, Dr. Akbar, and I'm particularly particular about this one because it is mind-boggling, the rate at which we've seen the price of eggs. Let's not even talk about the chickens. The price of eggs skyrocket in the last couple of months. I mean, this increase, close to maybe 80%, in some instances 100% increase, has come within a span of less than 2 months, if my memory serves me well. Because it would seem every time I go to buy eggs in the shops, every time there's been an increment. What exactly is going on?
Thank you so much, my sister. You know, it is not only in the last 2-3 months, according to your memory. It has been lingering in the last 1.5 years. But the high prices of egg, according to people, and according to all of us, because we all go to the market, has been on the high roof, more especially in the last 5-6 months. And the reason is not far-fetched. The reason is as a result of cost of production. You said it, and let me put it correctly, that so many of the agricultural products are being imported. But I want to say that in the last few years, we've never had corn imported into this country. Although we're being challenged by the shortage in production as a result of the COVID outbreak, as a result of the insecurity. But with the Anchor Borrowers Program, a lot of effort has been put in place. And to the best of my knowledge, there had never been maize import into this country in the last 5-6 years. So we are contending with the local production from our farms, especially buffered by the Anchor Borrowers Program. And generally, the price of maize has never been friendly. It is not only maize. The prices of commodity has never been very friendly. And if the prices of commodity have never been very friendly, and you have almost 80% of your cost of producing egg and chicken meat from two principal commodities of maize and soybean, then invariably your cost of production via finally the final poultry products of egg and chicken will also be high. And that is what is generally responsible. I'll give you an instance. In the last 1 year, the price of maize has risen per ton from 85,000 naira metric ton, invariably translating into 8,500 naira per 100 kilogram bag, to as much as 200 to 250,000 naira per bag. We are able to have a little succor by the release of grains from the central bank maize system, and that price has been hovering when you add transportation, and that has been able to stabilize the price of maize delivered to your farm at 220, 230, depending on where you are located. Now, that is maize.
Let me get this straight. You're saying that the price of maize went from 85,000 naira
in the last 1 year,
which translates to 8,500 naira per bag,
per 100 kilogram
bag,
yeah.
Yes, to what per 100 kilogram bag?
To 220. Even it came down to 220, but it went as much as in the last 7-8 months, it went as much as 250,000 per metric ton, which translates to 25,000 naira per 100 kilogram bag.
Okay.
Now
that's almost 200% increase.
Yes, but because of the intervention of the central bank Anchor Borrowers Program, you know, those who are on the field producing maize, you know, the final maize is being taken by the central bank, it's being aggregated by the central bank. And then the central bank releases it to the critical sectors, to the general public, to a critical sector like the poultry industry. And what they do that is to give some quantity of this maize directly to some of our feed millers, to some of the big producers, and to the association, so that we can also distribute this maize to the small and medium scale producers. And that has been able to stabilize the price, you know.
Do we know why maize has gone up like this? Do we understand why?
Yeah, there are so many factors. We had the COVID lockdown, which affected our production. We had the general insecurity across the length and breadth of this country, which affected people going to the farm. So it's just a matter of supply and demand. The poultry industry in Nigeria has expanded in the last 10 years exponentially to an extent that over 4.5 million metric tons of maize is needed by the poultry industry alone in 12 months. So if you take a chunk of 4.5 million metric tons of maize into the poultry, then you talk of the general food security of the nations. I'll give you an example. In the 19 states of the Federation, the basic staple food of an average non-Tana is masara. If it is masara,
corn.
Yeah, if it is corn.
Yeah.
Now, if it is corn, you can see the pressure on corn. Then industrial use. Then the second thing is that whatever is being produced in this country nationally is also being offtaken by our neighboring countries that are landlocked. You see Niger, invariably they come to the Kano market to offtake their maize. Some certain parts of Chad come to Nigeria, except now because of insecurity. If it is to my good knowledge, when I was in the Northeast practicing, you discover that Nigerian food products goes as much as to Central Africa. So that also put a lot of pressure. And because of the weakening of the Naira, you discover that when these people have little quantity of money, they come into this place, they change it, you know, they buy a lot of things. So this has put a lot of pressure on maize. And the second thing, in formulating your feed, 80% of your cost of production in producing chicken, which is the meat and the egg, is purely two principal commodities, maize and soya. Now, today, the Nigerian poultry industry alone need almost 1.2 million metric tons of soya on an annual basis to provide the plant protein need of the poultry industry. Our annual soya bean production is not up to 1 million. So what it means is that from the point of production and harvest, Nigeria is already deficient in soya.
So do we import soybean?
Well, we've never imported soybean, but what we try to do is that because we don't use full fat soya, especially except those who go into broiler meat production, and because of the high cost of using full fat soya, a lot of people use the residue, which is the cake. So it is the cake we use. And what we're trying to tell people is that soya moved from 118,000 per ton to today 410,000 naira per metric ton. The meal, which is the byproduct of oil extraction, which we use in the poultry industry, as of today was going as much as 395,000 naira per metric ton. And you need almost 30% of it to include in 1 ton of feed.
You know, some people will say that this is supposed to be good news because if the prices of commodities are going up, what it should do is that it should encourage more and more people to get into farming, to see how it is that they can not just bring down the cost of this product, but also to benefit from this. Because what it means is that there is a high demand and we're not able to meet up. From your own experience, what would you say are the challenges preventing more Nigerians from getting into farming? Is it a lack of knowledge, or is it a lack of capital, or what exactly are the challenges?
Thank you very much. What you have just enumerated, they're all there. They're all intrigues of activities. In farming now, and he has told you, the weakening of the Naira has actually aggravated the price of even the inputs the farmers are using on the farm. Today, when you want to expand your farm, or rather, if you want to, you know, in increasing even the yield, we have what we call vertical increase or horizontal increase. If we have to increase food production in Nigeria, we have to go the two ways, the vertical and the horizontal. But we have problems. if you want to expand your farm now, you cannot do manual, which the farmers were using. You have to go mechanized or using tractorization or the animal power. When you go to all those kind of a thing, the prices of using those sources of farming activities has gone high. Like tractor now, if you want to buy a set of tractor, like the John Deere, it used to be less than 10 million, but now it's getting to 80 million in with some people. And the farmer who they might have cultivated his farm hiring for maybe say 4,000 per hectare. Now for 10, 15,000, you can't get it. The price of diesel has gone up. The price of the tractor itself has gone up. And how would they do that work for you at a very cheaper rate? So we are looking at the farmer, as the price of the food is increasing, it is a result of the input in the production that's also increasing. The price of herbicide now has gone up very seriously. And we cannot continue using the manual because that will bring a lot of drudgery in the agricultural industry. And we want to bring the youth now into agriculture. So we have to remove all those drudgery. So in bringing them, you need a lot of money. And when you go to look for credit facilities now, it's another horrible thing. Sometimes you will start in December. Before you get it, it's already August. What do? The rainy season is gone. Even the Anchor Brewers program, very, very beautiful. However, in the implementation, because it is public-private, the private sector who will uptake these people are in control. And when they are bringing this input, sometimes the prices are it's another thing. So when the farmer aggregates all this, because when you say you farmed and you want to make profits, you have to look from the scratch, from the land clearing down to the bagging and storage. How much have you spent? And if you want to make farming as a business, you have to bring at least the cost of your production must be taken into account. So when you do that, for sure, the food price must go up. And again, as he talked also, it's about demand and supply. Yes. Now with the current physical insecurity that we're having, people are even afraid to go to the farm. Like in the north, where chunk of maize is produced as indicated, you know what is happening over there. People even pay the bandits to go to farm. And sometimes, in some cases, you hear that even after paying them, they don't even allow you to go. So you see that there must be food shortage. And actually, we have been producing like the maize more than we can consume in this country. In their own poultry industry, when we want to produce maize, I know I was involved in the AflaSafe program. Because when you want to formulate your feed, it must be clean out of aflatoxin. Otherwise, you're already introducing disease in your animals, and they will not grow. Then he knows the implication as a poultry man. So we have integrated the use of AflaSafe. And when you are bringing AflaSafe, I was involved in the pilots by the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, Ibadan. I was also one of the person in charge of FCT in the implementation. It was sold then at subsidized to some extent, but now, when the private sector is taking, it's additional cost to even the main production. So that if you want to produce safe maize for the poultry industry, in this situation, it must be aflatoxin free. And you are increasing that to your production. So that must be the price of corn will have to go. And he has said, yes, one of our problems in agriculture is we are feeding the West African countries. Most of our food are being smuggled.
Are they being smuggled or they are being bought? Are they allowed to come into the market and buy, aren't they?
Well, go to the border, you see what is happening. We know when you say smuggling, they're even taken without following the due process.
Okay. I think what he means by smuggling is that, you see, anything that is outside formal trade
is smuggling.
The moment it becomes an informal trade, it is never documented, there is no gain onto that trade. Because if it is formal, then you could now say, fine, I could earn some foreign exchange. Then you could count some from the benefit of hindsight, what are the pluses and the minuses. But this is completely informal. And if it is completely informal, then it is not to your advantage.
No, it's smuggled.
Is it to the advantage of the farmer, though?
As a farmer, yes, it's to our advantage. Because, like they say, that most of the, at least almost all the countries surrounding us, their currency is higher than our own now. And that's the advantage they're even taking. So the maize that a farmer will sell in Nigeria, and he takes it to Nigeria, their currency is higher than ours. So you make more money.
Doesn't even take it. They come to buy.
They come to buy and go. So some people are involved, and then, as you say, it is not in the formal this thing. It is being smuggled, and you can see that even the state is not gaining, because if you go through formal, you have to pay some tax. So, but it is actually to the advantage of the farmer, because like before, I, as a professional, I'm involved in the farming too. I sell farm produce. The prices we were selling in the past, as you were saying, yes, the maize price has gone up. And even see farmers now, during off-season, the price will skyrocket more. There are so many who have maize now in their store. They're waiting for the price to increase. I think it's about, is it 200,000 per ton now around the local market? You see at 20,000 per bag. So, and before June, I think
it's going to come at the peak. By May, June.
By May, June, it's going to appear. And so many farmers are waiting. So it's at the advantage.
So there's also hoarding.
Yeah, they hold it. There are some people.
Call it business.
It's business now. So all those things are, creating problems. But the major thing is, one is, if there's a way that the cost of production could come down, that will also bring about reducing the price. And on the other way, if the government can go and buy this produce from the farmers at higher price, and then sell it as highly subsidized, that's another thing. And sometimes you cannot stop the farmers selling at their will price because they are not getting the input at subsidized. So if you are not giving me input at subsidized, you cannot control what I'm going to sell. So to some extent, the government is trying, but it's not getting very well to the farmers.
Well, Professor Kenny Faye is a development economist, and I'm sure that he must be aware of some of these challenges. Prof, have you been able to aggregate what the challenges are to be able to come up with solutions to some of our very complex problems with regards to agriculture?
Reasons we are dragging our feet as a country to sign European Partnership Agreement was because of the reluctance, not just the impact it would have on our manufacturing sector and our value addition, but the fact that EU didn't want to put subsidy on the table. They're subsidizing agriculture in the European Union. The moment you talk about anything after subsidy, all the French farmers will be on the streets. So it baffles me that we are happy to fund 3 trillion on consumption of petrol rather than put even 1 trillion to the subsidy of the production of food. Particularly this value chains we are talking about. You don't subsidize consumption, you subsidize production to keep jobs at home. So that's the paradox. Then the second one is that we have devaluation in our economy. I mean, I'm from ECOWAS Commission. Over the last few years, 5 years, 6 years, 1 naira was buying 3 francs CFA. Now, you'll be lucky if you get 1 franc CFA for 1 naira. So that is the impact of devaluation. And then when you remember that we are surrounded by Francophone countries, Nigeria is actually feeding 300 million people, not 200 million people. If you look at the northern Cameroon, Chad, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, and then the northern is Benin, and Togo as well. We are feeding these people that are upstream. because they have more adverse weather and name it. But also the demand factor that their currency is far stronger than our own. So our food appears extremely cheap to them. So they don't even need to worry themselves growing anything anymore because they can do good business buying our things and using them themselves because it's 60% devalued based on what they are. So also, the traditional challenge we've been having with those surrounding neighboring countries is that they just come and buy our food when it's cheap at harvest season, as you just mentioned, 100,000 naira a kilo at the ton at the harvest, not at the point of harvest. And because we have issues about storage facility, issues about power for drying the crops, and they carry them away. They dry them, they bring them back. God knows how they dry them. After all, their temperature is higher, they can put it out on the street and all that. But they bring them back during farming season to sell them at almost double the price. So that's good business for them. Now, aided by devaluation of the currency. So you can see that. But of course, the third one is that they are all members of ECOWAS. And under ECOWAS Treaty, we have free movement of foods. Primary foods are moved freely in the region, no tax, no duty, and there's nothing we can do about that. We're not going to sign off from ECOWAS. And then we're now going into continental free trade. Now, anybody in Africa can actually come and carry our food, raw food. But when you add value, which is what the critical thing, when you do value addition, then they will have to pay tax to move the food across the border. If they don't want to pay tax, they have to register for ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme, ETLS. But then they must meet the rule of origin, that at least there is 30% value addition. So under that, they can now be registered and they can move their goods duty-free. So at least we can get some dollar there if they have to pay tax. But it's not the case. Now that brings us to the third tangential issue, which is when Ban Ki-moon, before he just left office, he said that the world will need 30% more food by the year 2030. But the climate section of the UN told him that, look, the world will produce 30% less food by 2030 because of climate change factors. And you can see those climate change factors coming down to us from the northern frontiers of our neighboring states. So you can see the drift, and it's even seen how it ends up with animal clash between the head and all that. It's all part of the drift downwards to the sea. Now, so the issue here is that Nigeria will be 300 million people by 2030. At the moment, the population drift will move from 50% in the urban area to 75% in the rural area, on the rural to urban, 50 to 75% because the urbanization rate is 4.6%, population growth rate is 3%. So, and then the young people, the average age of the farmer, is about 65 years. So the issue is this: 70% of our population will be in the urban area. And who's going to grow the food? All the young people are moving. They're all moving following infrastructure. You can't convince them to stay in the rural area where there's no light, their power, they're having issue with their connection. So, we have to deal with it. And then you now compound this with the asymmetric warfare going on in all these geopolitical zones. Meaning that there's a shrinkage of our agroecological footprint. And that's why the intervention of the central bank was so critical, because people would, I keep saying it, more people would have died of starvation in our country than COVID and all the warfare put together, but for the intervention of this Anchor Borrowers program. But what Anchor Borrowers program has done, which is good news for us, is that...
Let's take a break at this point. We will come back and take a more critical look at the Anchor Borrowers program, the areas it has intervened, and what level of success it has recorded, and if it can be replicated in other areas of the economy. In just a moment, please stay with us. We're still talking about the agro-economy and how to ensure that Nigeria is self-sufficient when it comes to primary foods which it consumes. We have a panel of guests here, very seasoned in their fields. I'm going to be throwing this conversation over now to Lagos for questions from my colleagues. Gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Markwe. You talked about the Anchor Borrowers program, which we'll come to in a moment. But I'd like to quickly take Professor Kenife up on this one because it's quite important. So we're talking about having agriculture contribute more to the economy. Currently, it's doing about 25% of the GDP, contributing about 25%. That's more than I think industries, but half what we have with services. But if you take it backwards, the crate of egg about 2 years ago was between 800 and 1,000. Now you get it for 2,000, 2,500. So it's more expensive to afford food. I mean, to pay for these goods and all that in the agricultural sector. So how can we get agriculture to contribute more to the economy when people can hardly even afford, I mean, the basics like egg, bread, and all of that? So really, is that whole chain defective, sort of?
Well, I don't think it is, but I think we need to do more, and we have to be far more rational in the way we apply our resources. You cannot convince me. I'm telling you, you can't convince me why the nation will be spending 3 trillion naira subsidizing a product that is being consumed by people other than Nigerians. Why the capacity to produce food, which is far more essential to our existence, is completely ignored. And then I can't understand that. Why can't you take one of those 3 billion and put it in agriculture? You create more employment, use it to subsidize agriculture. You subsidize production, you don't subsidize consumption. Full period. You want to subsidize consumption, you're subsidizing somebody else who are abroad, paying for the jobs. So we're going to get to terms with that. But there is something else connected to this. We also need to begin to look, because 80% of the feed, 80% of the cost of producing chicken, of course, is feed. 70% or more of producing fish is also feed. And the prices are going up. So it has a knock-on effect on the price of the product. Why don't we start looking at some substitute products? I know in Cameroon, for a very long time now, they are using the stem, the banana stem and then the plantain stem. They are heavy and they are wasteful. You don't do anything. You just take the banana and cut that huge 80 kilogram tons, put it down. Now, what they do is that they dry that, they cut them, they dry them, they pulverize them, and they use them to substitute 33% of the maize, the carbohydrate. So that is a huge savings, and they're using that. And we should start doing that, because whatever you can do to bring, even spent grains use barley, used in brewing, and some of the other there are spent grains that we can bring and then grind them and use them to reduce granite has issues, but the cake and was longer because they are very prone to toxins, mycotoxins, including, of course, aflatoxins. But there are many substitutes that we can begin to look at now and use them to augment the protein and the carbohydrate content of the feed.
So essentially, Prof, you're saying, just before I take this subject, essentially you're saying that we can actually cut down the price currently if we look into those alternatives and subsidizing production.
Check Cameroon, they are using a lot of those, you know what I mean by the banana? You see that huge trunk, you cut off the banana, what happens? It's all like they cut them, break them into pieces, dry them, then grind them, and then use them to supplement carbohydrate, but not 100% of the carbohydrate, but at least 33 to 35% of the carbohydrate is cut down by using those. And then also you have other spent grains I have mentioned.
Okay. So let's take this to...
Don't do anything with the spent grains. And there are many grains that we can use to substitute for the protein. So we should be looking at some of those, as well as intensifying and bring subsidy into this whole thing. It is not fair.
Prof, let's do this. Pardon me, let's take this to Dr. Akpa in Abuja, because you have touched on very important points. And I'd like to see how this or these points are being taken on board. So, Dr. Akpa, so he's talked about first on the government side, trying to subsidize production. And we're focusing on the poultry subsector, because, I mean, you represent that subsector, and it's important to see how that works within your sector. So subsidizing and also finding alternatives. By the way, we're talking about maize imports. I mean, in 5 years, you said that you don't think that there have been imports, but I don't think that's entirely true, because I recall the governor of the CBN saying, well, he will do all he can to stop the current imports that we're having. I recall that there were waivers granted at some point to, I think, 4 companies to import when we had issues with production. In fact, the USDA put our import, as at last time, at about 300,000 tons or thereabouts. So Clearly, these things are there, but perhaps you don't engage in it. But let's go back to the point Professor Ife was making about getting government to subsidize and you looking for alternatives. How has it been trying to get alternatives so people can at least afford the products and boost, the agriculture subsector to add more to the nation's GDP?
Yeah, thank you, my brother. I just want to reflect my memory back. You know, when you said the high cost of production of egg and chicken has been mostly because of the import of grains into this country. That is why I said in the last 5-6 months, there have never been major import of maize into this country. Yes. Just barely 2 years back, I think I was on a program here, and when we had the highest price rise in maize, the Central Bank of Nigeria granted 4 companies to bring in 262 or 282,000 metric tons of maize. Now, in a situation where you have 4.5 million metric tons annual maize requirement, 265 or 285,000 metric tons or thereabout, to me is negligible. I won't call it import because it was just an intervention, just like the CBN is doing through the Anchor Borrowers Program. So to me, I don't call that direct importation that has impacted on the prices of egg and chicken the way we are talking right away. Like Professor Ike said, you see, it is not only in Cameroon. At the moment, Nigerian poultry industry is able to stay afloat because of using other alternative source of raw material. For example, cassava peels being developed and refined by the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture is actually being used by most of our feed millers as part of the energy requirement of producing poultry feed. If they were depending 100% on using maize as energy supply for the poultry feeds completely, the prices of final poultry feeds like we are having today wouldn't have been able to be even affordable by any poultry farmer. So almost 20 to 30% of cassava peel is being used by most of our feed millers. Now, the second thing is that there is what we call feed-grade wheat. The feed-grade wheat is not the normal wheat that is being used for flour milling. It is wheat that is being used as an alternative to maize. So most of our farmers also use what we call feed-grade wheat. And by the time you add 30% feed-grade wheat, you use 20% cassava peel, then you discover that the prices of feed comes down invariably. And that is what has been able to keep the poultry industry afloat up to this moment. So it is not peculiar to Cameroon or other people. You know, in situations where every person is trying to reduce cost of production and to be able to produce for Nigerians to afford the final poultry products, people are using all kinds of, and that is why our feed nutrition experts basically every day are on research and development. And then the moment they discover one alternative ingredients, they shift to using it. But you can't use it 100%. And that is why today the poultry industry is still afloat. If we were depending on maize as a complete source of energy, 100%, today, no poultry feed, no farmer will be able to afford poultry feed. And I also want to add, other than maize and soya, you discover that the price of offal, wheat offal, which used to be 2,500 naira per 100 kilogram bag, as of last week, the price of one bag of offal of 100 kilo is as much as 9,000 naira. Now, because of also the devaluation of the naira, you discover that the 10 to 15% micro ingredients, the toxin binders, the lysine, the methionine, the enzymes, the other components that are imported are also exerting high pressure. And there is no way you can have alternative for most of these things. Amino acids, you can hardly have alternative locally. So these are what is impacting. But just to buttress what Professor Ike has said, we are actually devising means, and a lot of our practitioners, the feed millers especially, and our nutritionists are always on research, and then they're coming up with a lot of alternative ingredients to having poultry feeds. And we are actually doing it. We are hammering on the basic ones.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
it seems that one can't even wait for those alternatives, because I remember an African proverb that says, before the corn came, chickens fed on something, but maybe not for commercial purpose. Let me ask Mr. Adamu this question, especially because he is operating at a local government level. Mr. Adamu, there is part of the value chain in agriculture that I remember back in time, something that they call extension services. I mean, in the entire, space, crop farming, plant, and all those things, it would seem like there are certain aspects of of the entire value chain that we have compromised over the years. And many people, when they even hear it these days, it sounds like gibberish to them. For instance, this extension services thing that we know seem to have been compromised over the years, and it's like a drill down effect of agriculture to the local government level. How severely is that sector compromised? And in your opinion, if we are going to look at food production, food security sustainably, what do we need to do urgently, especially from the local government level?
Thank you very much. Actually, yes, that's what we have said. Local government plays complementary role in the extension service, because in the design, the ADPs, Agricultural Development Projects, handles extension services. And at the same time, the Department of Agriculture in the local government, they also do that. When you look at even the systems of the local government in some of the states, you will see that there are so many things that you can just say there are nothing to write home about, even the funding at the local government. But specifically, where I come from, in Abuja, the local government, we call them the area councils, are working. Like where I head the Agric department in the Abuja Municipal Area Council, we do a lot of work together with the farmers. Like all we have in Abuja Municipal Area Council, we have 62 wards. And in every ward, we have the leaders of the farmers. And we have posted so many extension staff in all the wards, and they're working collectively with the farmers. And this is creating a lot of impact, and that is also helping in producing food, especially with the teeming population that is coming every day to the Abuja area, to FCT. And that is what has been stemming some of the food production in FCT.
Okay.
And
one can only expect
the ADPs.
Yes, one can only expect that this can be cascaded all over the nation, because I can just imagine the ripple effect that will have on our food production. Professor Ike, we seem to have a major distraction or gap in a number of areas in our lives. This next question is for Professor Ken Ife. In Nigeria, we produce just about 10% of the honey that we consume in this country. The rest of it are imported. I also recall that the Minister of Agriculture at some point had said that the livestock value chain in Nigeria is worth 30 trillion naira. We have a huge potential, yet we have all of these challenges bedeviling the progress that we need to make. What, in your opinion, is the issue as an economist now? And drilling this down, especially to the local government areas, as I've asked Mr. Adamu. This question is for Professor Ken Ife.
Well, I'm glad you started with honey. Brazil decided to be the #2 biggest production of honey in the world. They commissioned a professor. The professor went around the world looking for the bee queen that will give them the productivity that they want. And they ended up coming to Nigeria. He actually went to Nsukka, and they came out with the African queen. That African queen was what they saw, and it was producing 3 times more than the European bees and the American varieties and South American varieties. But the only challenge it has is that when they sting, they kill you. So the stinging power of the bee is the one that is deadly. So they now started crossing it with other bees from other continents to see if they can temper the ability to kill, the ferocity. So that's what they were trying and crossing. But they found out that wherever they cross, whatever they cross, with our own still has the highest productivity, and they cannot stop that aggression. That aggression was still dominant. It's like if a white woman marries a black man, the child will still be looking black hair. If a black man marries a white, so in the same way, wherever you go, we'll still have this genetic superiority. So but now they are now getting the highest yield in it. So it is the same thing like palm oil. The Malaysians came here and collected the tenara, and they are now doing more than 20 times more than we do. We're no longer even in the map. We used to be 60%. So the thing is this: we are the base. We have what it takes. But what we have not done is what has now been done, using a program that structures the participation of to actually bring commercialization in the way we produce. Because don't forget, America, only 4% of the population is involved in agriculture, and they can feed the world. Whereas here, we are struggling with 60% of population which are involved in agriculture, struggling to feed ourselves. So what the Anchor Bureau has did, which people haven't even been talking about, is that it has transformed the subsistence agriculture system we know it from commercial farming. And it has also destroyed the myth that you can only be a commercial farmer when you own 5,000 hectares or whatever, and then you employ. No, you can be 1 man, 1 hectare, and be in a chain where you are using standardized feed, controlled input, mechanized agriculture, and then you produce in the same way as 1 man that has 50,000 hectares is producing. And even better, because you are creating 50,000 jobs. If you have 50,000 farmers with 1 man, 1 hectare, and for goodness sake, 4.8 million people in the first time in their life here have got loan without collateral, and then done 5.2 million. So what will have happened is that we have created that window, and then the aggregation of the produce by a central bank and now going to release it is a mechanism to contain the flying away of our produce to the northern parts of the Africa. That is our northern frontiers. So what we should say to government is we need a fiscal. I'm not saying to monetary, because don't forget the monies are borrowed. You can't tell federal bank to subsidize because it's borrowed money. The fiscal money has to come in to subsidize that thing CBN is about to release to the mailer who will mail and produce the feed. That is the point where, because we now have an edge, we have an entry into this equation. Now let the fiscal incentive come, put some of that subsidy to say to CBN, okay, please, let's give you 500 million, reduce this price, and then give it to your people who are going to mail and produce the food for the feed. So in that way, you are not going to focus on policies that will never get you anywhere in trying to contain what is going on of the flight of our produce up north. Because these people have currency advantage, they need it so much. And if you say, okay, rather than sell in Kano, bring it down to Lagos, look at the transportation costs. 1 ton, to transport 1 ton from Kano to Lagos or Port Harcourt costs 100,000 naira. And I'm sure it would have gone up now with petrol. So you can't compete. This Kano is so close to them. Those northern frontiers are so close to them, and they have advantage because your food is so cheap to them. So they'll buy them. So you can't stop them. And why would you stop when you are part of a treaty? And you don't have to close border. So the whole thing is that the window now is that we have a system, ABP system, expand it to all the states, increase the products that are under the program, and then because you get back those that belongs to you for repayment of the money, subsidize that point so that you can enter into the system, control who processes it, and make sure it delivers to our people. So that's the angle that I have seen, where you can get it down. We need to subsidize agriculture. Let's stop playing games. If you don't subsidize agriculture, you will live to tell this story another day.
Prof, it's a fine place to leave this conversation for today because we're totally out of time. I'm trying to see how we can lobby our producers to see if we can have this same panel back tomorrow, because there is so much to unpack in the agricultural sector, and so much for Nigerians to learn about why the price of food seems to be out of reach of almost, I don't want to say the common man, because I don't know what the definition of the common man is anymore. But gentlemen, I have to thank you so much for coming on this morning. I hope that if our producers agree to that, you'll be willing to come again tomorrow, will you?
Yeah, because we've never been able to express what is to be done. Because especially for the poultry industry, if it continues like this, for a population of over 200 million people, still consuming low in terms of per capita, per person, chicken meat and egg, then we'll eventually, every person will close shop. And the moment we close shop, then that means the poultry industry will be taken up by cheap import, especially with the African Continental Trade Agreement.
Well, we have your commitment on that, so let me hold on to that and let us see what our producers will eventually decide. But we have to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on this morning. We've been speaking with Dr. Onalu Akpa, who is the Director General Poultry Association of Nigeria, Dr. Shuaibu Adamu, who is an agronomist and crop specialist, and Professor Ken Ife, who joined us via Zoom, and he's a development economist. Well, we also have feedback from you as we go, a few tweets. This one is from Professor Enakena, and he says, it's time to subsidize the agroeconomy and food production rather than waste our scarce resources in subsidizing petroleum products that has not helped to grow our economy. Rather, we must invest in solar energy where we have comparative advantage to boost the economy.
Ahmed Chua says, let the government and the union try and negotiate to avoid the strike. ASU is on strike for the past 6 weeks. Please let the ministers of education and labor meet the SSANU, NASU leaders to prevent the looming strike.
Well, Victor's mail is on the use of coins, saying the cost of making the coin is much more expensive than the actual value of a coin. We had this conversation earlier on. The currency is becoming valueless. We need to fix our economy, and when we achieve that, we can consider recalibrating the naira, maybe remove 10 from the nominal figure.
Well, that's a fine place to leave the conversation this morning. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Maokwe Ogunyusu.
By the way, if you want to learn how to lobby, you should book a class with Maokwe. Well, that's been the program for today, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'm Kayode Okikelu.
I'm Ayo Makide. Have a wonderful rest of your day.